My name is Alison Navarre, 26 years old. The church smelled like beeswax and old lilies, the kind that bruise to brown at their edges, no matter how carefully you trim the stems. I stood at the back beneath the balcony where the hymnals gathered dust and watched my family arrange themselves as if grief had assigned them pew numbers. My mother dabbed the corner of her eye without smudging a lash. My father leaned forward, elbows on knees, the posture of a man about to close a deal. My brother cracked his knuckles so softly you had to be raised in our house to hear it. I had flown home from my uncle's funeral and realized, before the first prayer, that I was a guest in a family I used to belong to. 5 years earlier, I'd left on a Barcelona scholarship to study architecture. The only thing I'd ever wanted that didn't require anyone else's permission. They called it abandonment. They wanted me home to run my father's construction company while he drank himself into generosity in the evenings and fury by morning. When I refused, the phone went dead. Birthdays passed like unmarked exits on a highway. Emails about graduating with honors went unanswered. When I sent a photo of my first published design, sunlight carving a courtyard into places where women could feel safe, my mother texted back, "Some of us have real problems." I survived on espresso, drafting pencils, and the kind of ramen that turns your tongue to salt. I waited tables between studio critiques, counting tips like a rosary. Meanwhile, the trust my grandfather left for all the grandchildren was mysteriously losing weight. $400,000 vanished into a purpose no one could quite define. They said I was spending it. "For her art hobby," my cousin whispered once at a barbecue, the way you whisper that someone keeps a lover across town. The service ended, we drifted into the parish hall where the coffee was bitter and the lighting unforgiving. The estate lawyer, a careful man with careful shoes, cleared his throat and asked the family to gather. The room quieted by degrees until even the air seemed to listen. "As of last month," he said, "all withdrawals from the Morrison Grandchildren Trust require dual authorization. One of those signatures must belong to Ms. Alison Navarre." Silence cracked like ice. My mother's smile failed an inch. My father's jaw found a hinge it liked better. "That's absurd," he said, with the laugh people use to erase things. "She hasn't contributed a dime." "It's in accordance with an amended clause your father executed," the lawyer continued, eyes on his paper, "pending a forensic audit of the last 5 years." I didn't look at anyone. I looked at the floor and thought about how architects learn to read load-bearing walls, not by belief, but by pressure. "How much is left?" I asked, because someone had to say a number out loud. $1.8 million, he said, frozen. Aunt Leda's wineglass snapped at the stem as if the word itself had weight. Red spread across the white tablecloth, pooling like a wound. She stared at the blooded linen as if it had betrayed her. At dinner that night, the house played at normal. Candles, the nice plates. Friends who'd known me since braces smiled with careful curiosity. "Our daughter who's been finding herself in Europe," my mother said, tilting her head toward me as if I were a foreign exchange student. My younger brother, who had failed out of community college twice and once called drywall a porous steel, was praised for his business acumen. Laughter rolled over the table like a warm front. Under it, something colder moved. "You've caused a tremendous amount of trouble," my father said when plates were cleared and the friends had left and the house settled into its after-dinner hush. "You don't understand the complexities." "Enlighten me," I said. He smiled. He had a salesman's smile, generous, toothy, practicing sincerity like it was a musical instrument. "Cash flow," he said. "Short-term liabilities. The trust was collateral for a bridge we needed to finish a very lucrative set of contracts. The loans are time-sensitive." "How time-sensitive?" He didn't answer. In our family, silence was a negotiating tactic. In mine, I'd learned to treat it like a blueprint. Follow the blank sections, and you'll find the hidden stair. When they went to bed, I walked the house the way I used to as a child when sleep wouldn't come and the walls had secrets. Grandfather's study kept its own weather. It smelled like pipe tobacco even though he'd quit years before, like paper and cedar, and the slight medicinal breath of old leather. Drawers slid under my hands as if they remembered me. I found what I knew I would, a folder labeled confidential. The label itself a challenge. Inside, loan documents, $2.3 million, due in 6 weeks. The trust as collateral. And then the worst thing you don't know you're looking for until your hands begin to shake. Incorporation papers for a Cayman company dated 3 months ago, with my forged signature as president. They hadn't only stolen from the trust, they'd cut a hole in the ice and written my name on the surface. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. "We know what they did to you," the text read. "We know what they're planning next. Meet me at the old warehouse tonight if you want proof that goes deeper than you imagine." Attached, a photo of my parents in a law office yesterday, shaking hands with a man I recognized from the news, a federal prosecutor known for cleaning rot out of white-collar woodwork. They were holding documents with my photo clipped to the top. In the reflection of the glass frame behind them, you could see the photographer, a ghost with a camera where a face should be. Another text. "Your grandfather knew everything. Check his safety deposit box. Number 447. The key is exactly where he told you it would be." My heart stumbled. I had never told anyone about my grandfather's last words to me, whispered from a hospital bed as the machines counted his leaving. "Under the false bottom," he'd said, "when the time comes." A secret inside a secret. I had thought he was delirious. I had been wrong. I set the papers down and stood very still. In school, we learned to design for catastrophe, earthquakes, floods, fires. You don't stop the earth from moving. You build so that when it does, the building leans and lives. I felt the tremor in my hands and imagined a flexible frame rising inside my ribs. At the sink, my mother rinsed a glass the way she does when she needs a task to occupy her face. "You've upset your father," she said without turning, "after everything he's done for you." I watched the way water ran off crystal, the clean sound it made. "What exactly has he done for me?" Her grip tightened on the glass. "You know what I mean." "I do," I said softly. I remembered birthdays uncalled, emails unanswered, the message about real problems. I remembered the accidents that weren't, the nurse who asked gentle questions, the teacher who phoned social services and later forgot she had. I remembered my grandfather's hand over mine in the study, guiding my pencil along a compass line. "You're the only one who sees clearly," he told me. "Build what's true, even if they hate you for it." She set the glass on the rack and turned, smile polished to a shine. "We have friends coming tomorrow to pay respects. Try to be gracious." "I'm meeting someone," I said. "Who?" "An old foundation," I said, because sometimes the best lie is a metaphor, something that could keep the house from falling. Her eyes narrowed. "Don't be dramatic." In my room, no, in my mother's meditation space, because my childhood had been boxed and bagged into the garage, I checked under the old jewelry box I'd rescued from a shelf. False bottom, just as he said. Taped there, a small key in a plastic sleeve labeled, in my grandfather's careful script, 447. Outside, the cicadas lifted their one-note orchestra until the night sounded like a power line. The drive to the old textile warehouse took me past streets that no longer recognized me. Storefronts had changed hands. An entire block had been scraped down and replaced with glass that reflected nothing but itself. The warehouse waited at the edge of town where the factory closures in the 90s had left their dead behind. Its windows were punched-out eyes. The parking lot was an empty tongue. Only one car idled near the loading bay, a black sedan with tinted windows. The air tasted like dust and heat. I parked, killed the engine, and listened to the tick of cooling metal as my courage arranged itself into something that could walk. "Be gracious," my mother had said, as if courtesy were a currency and I were behind on payments. I thought of Aunt Leda's glass, the red blooming across white linen like a map you didn't want to read. I thought of the forged signature with my name where my life should be. I thought of my grandfather's letters tucked into rooms I had yet to find, and of the way sunlight in Barcelona had taught me that even narrow streets can hold a sky. I stepped toward the shadowed entrance. The door groaned open on a hinge that hadn't been oiled since the last time the town believed in itself. A figure separated from the darkness, as clean and deliberate as a line drawn with a steel ruler. She was maybe 40, hair steel gray and sharp against the night, suit cut to move. "Thank you for coming," she said, voice steady as a plumb line. "I'm Detective Valentina Reyes, Financial Crimes." My mouth went dry. "Are you here to arrest me?" A corner of her mouth lifted, not quite a smile. "Quite the opposite," she said. "I've been building a case against your family for 18 months. You've just made my job much easier." The word easier felt like a door unlocking somewhere I couldn't see. The night shifted. The building leaned. but it did not fall. The warehouse swallowed sound the way thick snow eats footsteps. Detective Reyes led me along a corridor of shadows until we reached a pool of light cast by a single hanging bulb. Dust turned in it, slow, ceremonious. Her movements were spare and economical, like someone who never reached for more than she needed. "You're not here by accident," she said, nodding toward a steel table where a manila envelope waited like a verdict. 18 months of wiretaps, asset tracing, and a very stubborn old man who refused to die before he'd made his point. "My grandfather," I said. She didn't answer. She slid the envelope toward me with 2 fingers. Inside were photocopies of bank statements and wire records, a constellation of numbers I recognized the way architects recognize sightlines. The shapes they made were ugly. Money split and rinsed, rerouted through shell companies with names that tried too hard to sound like they were planted in soil. There were also transcripts, conversations recorded in a voice I knew the way you know your own reflection. "My mother. Once she's arrested, we can claim the trust was compromised. No one will question liquidating it to cover legal fees." "My father. 25 years I waited for the old bastard to croak. I will not let some ungrateful girl ruin the endgame." The words skimmed my skin like ice. I put the transcript down before my hand shook. "We didn't get these from your parents," Reyes said. "We got them from the study you walked through tonight. Your grandfather wired that room like a confession booth. Audio, video, redundant backups. He changed the trust clause himself with our guidance when he realized the siphoning had begun." "He knew," I whispered, and hated the way relief felt like grief wearing a new coat. "He knew more than he told you," she said, watching me like a doctor deciding how much truth a body can tolerate. "We can arrest them tonight on domestic charges, wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, but there's a deeper stratum we won't touch without your consent." "Because of me. Because of what follows the fuse," she said. "Grand juries, international partners, people who hurt people for a living. If we pull the wrong thread, innocent relatives, children, get caught in the fall. Your grandfather left a decision only you can make." The bulb hummed. I thought of load-bearing walls again, but now they were moral. Which beams could be removed without the roof crushing the neighbors? "He told me about the key," I said. Reyes's mouth ticked. "Of course he did. Box 447. We have expedited access with a judge's order, but I wanted you to see exactly what you're consenting to. You lead, we document." We drove to the bank in separate cars because theater matters and safety more. Night security took one look at Reyes's badge and a stack of sealed papers and buzzed us into a vault that preserved a colder century, brushed steel, a floor that reflected you at half opacity, the faint mineral smell of money asleep. Box 447 slid free with a shiver. The manager left us, door heavy behind her. Reyes set the box on a waist-high table and stepped back like a surgeon, yielding the first cut. Inside, a letter on cream paper, the edges softened by being read and reread by a hand that had argued with mortality and won enough to make arrangements. The handwriting was my childhood, upright, careful, a man who believed clarity was a kindness. "My dear girl, if you're reading this, it means I failed to persuade my children to choose decency. I am sorry for every omission that brought you to this room. Justice and revenge are first cousins that dress alike. Choose carefully who you invite to dinner. Justice heals. Revenge multiplies orphans. In the compartments below are 3 envelopes. Hammer 1 will poison the public well. Hammer 2 will free you. Hammer 3 will end this network and start a cascade that cannot be stopped without drowning a few innocents who only know how to breathe because of the guilty. I leave the arithmetic to you. Remember, you see clearly." My throat ached. "He always gave me choices with enough math in them to feel like love," I said, half to Reyes, half to the vault. "Open them," she said softly. Envelope number 1. Photographs. Not spreadsheets, not signatures. Faces. My father shaking hands with a city official I recognized from ribbon cuttings. A sleek office framed in a way that suggested they'd believe the camera was their friend. My brother at a party with girls too young for champagne and a grin that had learned to enjoy not being told no. There were timestamps, locations, metadata, evidence that didn't need translation. "Photos make juries understand what numbers hide," Reyes said, "but they also start fires. The girls will be protected, blurred, shielded, but the flames touch everything. I slid on one aside and opened a two. Property deeds. The Barcelona house with the wrought iron balconies and the narrow staircase that forced you to hold on to something human. An apartment in Madrid overlooking a museum I'd only visited on free days. A small vineyard in Tuscany, the kind of place where dawn mist lingers on leaves like an apology you can drink. Commercial properties too. Income streams that had been tucked where greedy hands couldn't reach because they'd never bothered to look where beauty lives. He wasn't poor, I said, shaken by the ordinary mercy of it. He just chose not to be rich in front of them. He chose to resource you, Reyes corrected. There's a difference. Envelope number 3 was heavier, a thickness made of plastic drives and paper that had been copied until the toner itself felt accusatory. I didn't open it right away. My fingers sat on it like it might bite. What's in there changes jurisdiction, Reyes said. Cartel channels, human trafficking payments, political protection in 3 countries. Pull number 3, and it stops being a family case and becomes a map of how millions are moved through the dark. And innocents drown, I said, remembering the letter. Cousins. The aunt who turned her head away but never signed anything. I thought of white roses bleeding across linen. Children who never chose the name on their mail. Reyes nodded once. We can keep number 3 sealed for now. The domestic case is already enough to put your parents away for decades. Your brother, too, assuming he flips, which he will. We take the house tonight. We break their spell. Then, when the victim protection teams are in place and our foreign partners have built a softer landing for the innocents, we unspool the rest. Something unclenched inside my chest. A building. Tested. Failing in the model so you can strengthen the joints before you pour the actual concrete. What happens to me? I asked, because questions are also a kind of bravery. They've forged my name onto a vessel in the Caymans. They've rehearsed a story where I'm the villain who embezzled to fund a life I never lived. You become a witness, not a warning, Reyes said. We've arranged provisional immunity, contingent on truthful cooperation. If the international side escalates, witness protection remains an option, but it doesn't have to be your destiny. Choice, remember? Choice. The word landed like a key in a lock I hadn't realized I'd been carrying under my tongue. I'll take the domestic tonight, I said. We arrest them at home, in the room he wired, with the papers they plan to make me sign. Number 3 waits until we can guarantee that the innocent don't pay the price for the guilty's architecture. She watched me for a beat, measured, weighing to see if my spine was built to code. Understood, she said. We'll need you in the room until the door breaks. We reboxed the envelopes. I tucked the letter into my jacket where my pulse could remember the shape of his words. On the way out, the manager asked if we needed anything else, her voice trembling with the thrill of being adjacent to a story she'd tell badly at brunch. Under the fluorescent vestibule, Reyes paused. Your grandfather wrote us a note the day he amended the trust, she said without flourish. He said you see how spaces can protect people, that you would know how to stand in one. I was 8 when I told him I wanted to design buildings, I said. He kept every drawing I ever made. He kept more than drawings, she said, and for the first time her composure thinned. He kept receipts on the men who thought they owned the city. We parked down the block from my parents' house while unmarked sedans bled into the dark like commas in a sentence meant to be read carefully. Through the windows, I could see the dining room lit to show off the woodwork my grandfather had chosen himself, a craftsman's humility pretending to be a boast. Papers were spread across the table. A man I didn't recognize sat with his briefcase open, the smell of new plastic and old lies reaching even to where we waited. Reyes adjusted the small in-ear monitor I hadn't noticed she'd slipped me in the vault. You'll go in. They'll try to sell you urgency. You'll ask a simple question. Do these documents transfer ownership of everything grandfather left? When he says yes, you put the pen down. On my mark, we enter. Load-bearing question, I said, and my mouth twitched, the ghost of a smile in a room that hadn't earned one. She looked at me, then at the house. Ready? I thought of the letter's arithmetic, of the girls and the photos who did not look old enough to know where to put their anger, of the Barcelona house holding its breath for me across an ocean, of the way my mother had said be gracious and meant be complicit, of white roses, of broken glass. Let's bring the roof down, I said. I walked up the path like a person raised there. I hung my keys on the hook by the door because my body still knew the choreography. The fake lawyer smiled with the kind of teeth that get cleaned before court dates. My father's eyes glittered with desperate charm. My mother's hand rested lightly on a stack of papers like a benediction. "These forms will take care of everything," the man said smoothly, tapping a signature line where my forged name had once been dragged across a different page. Simple inheritance logistics. I picked up the pen, then let it rest. "One question," I said. "Do these documents transfer ownership of everything my grandfather left? Not just the trust?" The man hesitated a fraction too long. "Well, yes," he said, recovering. "But that's a technicality. It simplifies matters." "Interesting," I said, and set the pen down. "There's just one problem." Across the room, Reyes's voice reached me through the barely there bud, steady as a line level. "Now." The front door burst open, wood protesting like a truth finally told. Agents poured through, voices braided into a single command. My mother flinched. My father stood half out of his chair and then sat, calculations stalling out. Handcuffs flashed like quicksilver. Detective Reyes stepped through the threshold with a badge that caught the chandelier and turned it honest. "Nobody move," she said, and for once in this house, everyone obeyed. The room felt it, the building leaning, but not falling, not yet. The sound of the front door splintering was louder than any apology my parents had ever offered. Agents in dark jackets swarmed through the foyer, their shouts overlapping like the echo of everything this house had refused to hear. My father froze, his half-smile still on, as if charm could stop a federal warrant. My mother's hand lifted slightly before falling back to the table, her bracelets clinking a nervous rhythm. The fake lawyer dropped his briefcase, papers scattered like pigeons. Detective Reyes moved with purpose, badge gleaming. "Thomas Morrison and Elena Morrison," she announced. "You're under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit grand theft." My father found his voice. "This is ridiculous. We're a respected—" "Not tonight," Reyes said. Her tone carried no heat, only authority that had learned to live without doubt. "An agent cuffed my mother. She didn't fight, didn't even look at me, only whispered something I couldn't catch. Maybe my name, maybe a curse. My brother tried to bolt toward the kitchen, but another agent intercepted him, slamming him against the refrigerator with a metallic thud that rattled magnets spelling family first. I almost laughed at the irony, but couldn't find the breath. The fake lawyer was already face down on the carpet, muttering about misunderstandings. Another agent opened his briefcase and whistled softly. Cash, burner phones, 2 flash drives, and a passport under a different name. My father's voice cracked. "Alison, tell them—" "That I forged my own name? That I set up a Cayman company to launder your debts?" I asked. "No, I think they have the right story now." For a moment, he looked like a child caught stealing from an offering plate, bewildered by the idea that rules applied to him. Then his expression hardened, and he leaned back in the chair like a man making peace with being misunderstood. Reyes motioned the team to sweep the upstairs. The house filled with the percussion of boots. Drawers yanked open, closets exposed, the sound of a family being dismantled. My aunt stood in the doorway, clutching her pearls so tight her knuckles blanched. Behind her, my cousin pressed himself against the wall, eyes wide and wet. "I'm sorry," I told them quietly, "but they were planning to destroy me." "I know," my aunt said, her voice a tremor. "I've known for years. I just couldn't." Fear is a builder, too. It constructs entire generations of silence. When the agents finally led my parents outside, my mother turned once, mascara cutting small, black tributaries down her cheeks. "You think you're better than us," she said, almost tenderly. "But you're still one of us." "Not anymore," I replied. She didn't respond. The car door shut, ending whatever language we'd shared. Reyes and I stayed behind as the house emptied. It felt different now, lighter, like someone had opened a secret window. "You all right?" she asked. I nodded, though my hands were trembling. "I don't know what all right means anymore." "It means breathing without permission," she said. "You're doing fine." She left 2 agents to catalog evidence and gestured toward the study. "There's something you should see." The room was exactly as my grandfather had left it, the heavy desk centered beneath the window, the faint smell of pipe tobacco still clinging to the curtains. Reyes flipped a switch, and a small red light blinked to life under the bookshelf, one of the hidden cameras he'd installed. "We've been collecting footage from this room for a year," she said. "Your grandfather was meticulous. He built his case like an architect builds a cathedral, slowly, with intention." I traced my fingers along the desk's edge, finding a groove where my pencil had bitten wood years ago. He'd let me sit beside him while he drafted plans for houses that never got built. He was teaching me more than drawing, I murmured. Reyes nodded. He trusted your eye. He said you see the weak points others ignore. On the desk lay another envelope, cream paper sealed with wax. The handwriting was unmistakable. For Alison, when the dust settles. My pulse stuttered as I broke the seal. Inside, a letter written in his steady script. My light, if you are reading this, then justice has done its slow work. I never told you how much I admired your courage to walk away from this house when staying would have been easier. I built my legacies on blueprints. You will build yours on truth. Go to the Barcelona address I left in the deeds. There is a home waiting, a place drawn from our conversations. In its foundation, you'll find more of me than this house ever held. Tears came without warning, falling onto the page like accidental punctuation. Reyes pretended not to notice. We'll need a statement in the morning, she said gently. Then you're free to go. Free, I repeated, tasting the word. It felt foreign, like a country I'd read about but never visited. Outside, the neighborhood watched through blinds, hungry for scandal. Flashing lights painted the siding red and blue. I imagined the whispers already starting, the prodigal daughter, the arrests, the trust fund. No one would ask how many nights I'd gone hungry while they bought new cars with my future. No one ever does. The next morning, the federal vans were gone. The house was sealed with yellow tape that fluttered in the wind like prayer flags for the living and the guilty. I packed a single suitcase and left the rest. The flight to Spain was quiet. Over the Atlantic, I reread my grandfather's letter until the ink blurred. When the plane descended, morning spilled gold over the Mediterranean, and for the first time in years, I didn't brace for impact. The address led me through narrow streets in the Gothic quarter, where iron balconies tangled with vines and laundry. The building stood at the corner of Carrère de l'Homme and Silence, 3 stories of stone warmed by centuries of sun. The key fit perfectly. Inside, air that smelled faintly of cedar and linseed oil, the ghost of fresh paint. On the first table sat another envelope with my name. Beneath it, a note. Welcome home. I opened the envelope to find blueprints, hand-drawn plans for a community center. At the bottom, my grandfather's signature and a small inscription, Morrison Women's Shelter. Designed by my granddaughter. Groundbreaking whenever she's ready. My knees went weak. He'd believed in me before I'd even finished believing in myself. Each room of the house held something. Letters hidden behind frames, clippings of my student work, photos from exhibits I hadn't known he attended. In the smallest bedroom, I found a drafting table stocked with new pencils. The good kind, the ones that leave a whisper instead of a mark when they glide. By sunset, I stood on the balcony, the city below glowing like embers in a hearth. My phone buzzed. A message from my cousin. They're calling it the Morrison scandal. Dad's facing 25 years. Mom, maybe 20. The government froze everything. Are you okay? I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Then another message from an unknown number. My daughter is safe because of your family's downfall. Thank you for choosing justice over blood. It was signed Carmen. I didn't know her, but I knew what she meant. The church bells rang somewhere beyond the rooftops, slow and deliberate. The Mediterranean breathed against the shore like the world was finally exhaling. I leaned on the balcony rail and whispered to the city, to my grandfather, to the ghosts we'd both tried to set free. I'm ready to build now. Below, the streetlights flicked on one by one, like the start of a blueprint, finding its shape in the dark. Freedom, it turned out, was quieter than I expected. The Barcelona house woke with the sea, soft gull cries, morning light dragging itself across tiled floors. For weeks I lived between silence and blueprints, my hands rebuilding what my family had tried to erase. But peace is a guest that never unpacks. The headlines followed me everywhere. Local magnate charged in international laundering scheme. Family trust scandal expands into global investigation. My name was always the footnote, granddaughter turned whistleblower. People called me brave, as if bravery and survival were different things. When the trial began, I didn't attend in person. I watched from a sterile conference room in the U.S. Embassy, a screen between me and the ruins of my bloodline. My father's expression didn't change as the charges were read. My mother's hands were folded neatly, the way she used to fold napkins before dinner. My brother shifted in his seat, avoiding the camera. By the end of the month, the verdicts were public. My father, 25 years. My mother, 20. My brother, 10, with the possibility of early release for cooperation. The justice system was generous to those who learned how to perform remorse. After the sentencing, I stood on the balcony watching the sunset stain the sea copper. For the first time, I wondered what came after justice. I had money now, properties, and the kind of safety that feels undeserved. But there are debts you don't pay with dollars. The call came 3 months later on the anniversary of my grandfather's death, an unlisted number, a voice that trembled with distance. Alison. I froze. Who is this? It's me. A pause. Your brother. For a second, the world tipped sideways. You shouldn't be calling me. I know, but I need to see you, please. There was background noise, a car engine, a radio, murmuring in another language. Where are you? At the cemetery, he said. Grandfather's grave. I left white roses. The line went dead. I told myself not to go. I told myself I owed him nothing. But guilt has its own gravity, and by nightfall, I was driving through streets slick with rain toward the place where everything had ended once already. He was waiting under the old oak, thinner than I remembered, a face carved by sleepless years. When he turned, the streetlight caught the hollows under his eyes. Hello, sister. You shouldn't be out, I said. They'll revoke your parole. He laughed softly. You think parole is my biggest problem? I stopped a few feet away. Then why call me? Because I needed you to know something. He crouched beside the grave and brushed fallen leaves from the stone. Prison changes you, or it kills you. For me, it did both. His voice cracked. They made us read the case files, the ones grandfather collected. Every document, every photo. Do you know what it's like to see the faces of the children your father sold? I didn't answer. The night pressed closer, damp and unrelenting. There was a girl, he said quietly. Lucia, 13, from Guatemala. She looked like our cousin's daughter. Same dimples, same age. She was trafficked 3 times before she escaped. He pulled a folded photograph from his coat. The edges were worn, handled too often. She testified against the men who bought her. The FBI used her story in the indictments. I read it every day until I couldn't breathe. I took the photo. The girl's eyes were too old for her face. Why tell me this? Because I want you to understand that what you did, turning them in, it was right. It was the only right thing anyone in this family ever did. Wind moved through the branches, scattering the roses he'd placed on the grave. He caught one before it hit the ground. I keep thinking about how many of them never got a second chance. I got one. I shouldn't have. I looked at him, this stranger wearing my brother's features. What are you planning to do? I'm trying to make it mean something, he said. The government gives reduced sentences to informants. They also give access to seized assets for rehabilitation programs. I'm redirecting some of that money to survivor funds, anonymous donations through NGOs. No credit, no name. You're stealing from the government, I said. He smiled faintly. I'm giving them back what we took. Call it balance. For a long time, we stood there in silence. The cemetery lights flickered against the marble, the world pausing between confession and absolution. I've been taking care of his grave, he said, every week since I got out. I noticed the trimmed grass, the clean stone, the careful arrangement of flowers. You did this? It's the least I can do. Then his face changed, shadow cutting across his expression. Dad hasn't learned anything. He's still dangerous. He's in prison. For now, but he's talking about deals, cooperating, the kind of cooperation that ends with freedom. Cold spread through my chest. You think he'll come after me? I know he will. He said it in front of me, called it unfinished business. He still believes you tricked grandfather into rewriting the will. That's insane. So was everything else he did. He reached into his jacket again and handed me a sealed envelope. This has everything I know. Names, contacts, places he's been writing to. If something happens to me, you'll know where to start. Are you in danger too? He gave a humorless laugh. I'm already dead, officially. Witness protection made sure of that. New name, new face, new life somewhere Dad will never find me. I just wanted to see you once more before I disappear completely. What's your name now? I asked. David, he said. David Chen. I work for a nonprofit in Seattle. We find housing for trafficking survivors. It's not redemption, but it's something. David, I repeated, tasting the name like an unfamiliar language. Will I ever see you again? Probably not. It's safer for both of us. He looked at the grave, his voice almost a whisper. He'd be proud of what you built, the community center, the lives it's touching. The first drops of rain began to fall, tapping the stone. How do you know about that? I asked. I've been following your work, he said. The Morrison Foundation helped fund 3 of our projects through intermediaries. You didn't know, but you've been helping survivors for 2 years without realizing it. He stepped back, pulling his hood up. Be careful, Allison. Dad has friends who aren't in prison. He's desperate. Desperate people don't stay quiet. And then he was gone, slipped into the night like a sketch erased from the page. The rain turned heavy, blurring the world into water and stone. I knelt by my grandfather's grave and opened the envelope. Inside were documents, photos, lists of offshore contacts, letters in my father's handwriting. Plans for escape, notes about me, addresses, schedules, a map of Barcelona with my house circled in red. By morning, I was on a plane again, heart hammering against the window's cold glass. When I landed, I went straight to Detective Reyes's office. She looked up from her desk, eyes narrowing as she read the papers I dropped in front of her. He's planning to disappear, I said, and he's coming for me. Her jaw tightened. We'll put you under federal protection. New identity, new life, effective immediately. What does that mean? It means Alison Navarre dies today, she said, and someone else takes her place. By nightfall, I was signing documents under fluorescent lights in a sterile government building. New passport, new birth certificate, new story. Isabella Varga, architectural consultant, Czech Republic. You'll have a handler, Reyes said. A secure residence in Prague. Stay invisible until we say otherwise. Invisible. I'd spent my whole life trying to be seen. That night, as the plane lifted into the dark, I watched Barcelona shrink into the distance, a city of light and forgiveness, fading beneath the clouds. I didn't know when I'd see it again, or if I ever would. Below me, the sea glimmered like broken glass, and I realized freedom had changed its shape once more. It wasn't silence anymore. It was exile. 6 months into my new life, I learned that anonymity is its own kind of prison. Prague was gray in the way old photographs are gray, muted edges, history smudged into every wall. My apartment sat above a bakery that opened before dawn. The smell of bread was constant, almost mocking. I worked at an architectural firm designing corporate headquarters that all looked like glass versions of regret. The city spoke in echoes, and I answered only when necessary. No one here knew who I was, and for a while that was safety. Then it became suffocation. Some nights I'd wake at 3 a.m. with my phone in my hand, thumb hovering over numbers that no longer existed. Other nights I'd dream of Barcelona, the sea breathing outside my window, the community center's courtyard filled with children's laughter. I missed noise. I missed purpose. I even missed fear. Then the news broke. Thomas Morrison escaped federal custody during a transfer to a medical facility. My coffee went cold before I realized I was still holding it. Detective Reyes called 2 hours later. Her voice was tight. We found evidence he planned this for months. He's been making calls from inside, using encrypted channels. Does he know where I am? Not yet, but he's looking. How long until he does? A pause. That's what we're trying to find out. 3 weeks later, the answer arrived disguised as a phone call. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Isabella? The voice was wrong and right at the same time. Who is this? It's David. The room tilted. How did you get this number? Witness protection isn't as airtight as they want you to believe. I heard about Dad's escape. He's in Eastern Europe, Czech Republic, maybe Slovakia. He's been asking questions about an American architect working in Prague. My breath caught. That's me. Then you don't have much time. I walked to the window, looking down at the narrow street. What do I do? Run again? Don't run, he said. Fight. Meet me in Vienna tomorrow. I have a plan. The next day, I took a train across the border under an assumed name. Every stop felt like a countdown. Vienna was bright and orderly, the opposite of how my life felt. David was waiting at a small cafe near the opera house, dressed like a man who wanted to blend into the background and never could. You look different, I said. Surgery helps. So does guilt. What's the plan? He leaned forward, lowering his voice. Dad's network is still alive. Fragmented but functional. They want to rebuild what the arrests destroyed. The only way to stop them is to draw him out, make him expose his connections. You want to use me as bait. I want to give you your life back. I stared at him, half in disbelief, half in recognition. The old brother, the one who used to build Lego cities next to me and then knock them down just to rebuild them better, was in there somewhere. How? You go back to Barcelona, he said. Resume your life as Alison Morrison. Make yourself visible again. Public interviews, architectural showcases, articles about the community center. He'll come for you, and when he does, we'll be ready. Interpol, FBI, local police, they'll all be in position. What if something goes wrong? He took a slow breath. Then I make sure he never hurts anyone again. There was something in his tone, resignation, maybe acceptance, that chilled me. You sound like him, I said quietly. No, he said. I sound like grandfather. He understood that sometimes you have to build traps disguised as doors. We spent hours planning. Reyes joined via encrypted call, her voice faint through static. We'll treat this as a controlled operation, she said. We call it Operation Family Values. We'll position agents in Spain, Austria, and the Czech Republic. If he surfaces, we close in. When I boarded the flight back to Spain, the fear in my stomach was the old familiar kind, the kind that keeps you alive. The Barcelona air hit me like memory. My house was just as I'd left it, the balcony railing still warm from the sun. The community center had finished construction, a mosaic of light and purpose. Children played in the courtyard, their laughter cutting through the hum of the city. The architectural details you designed, the new director said, leading me inside. They make people feel safe. See that alcove? The curved walls prevent blind corners. The glass ceiling brings in natural light all day. I watched a little girl sitting on the floor, drawing with crayons. She looked up and smiled. What's your name? I asked. Carmen, she said. The name hit like a bell. The same woman who'd texted me years ago about her rescued daughter. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe it wasn't. Over the next month, I followed David's instructions. Interviews, lectures, a magazine spread titled The Architect Who Turned Betrayal into Hope. My face began to appear online again, attached to words like visionary and survivor. Every post was bait. The first sign came when I returned home one evening to find my door ajar. Nothing was stolen, but the drawers were open, the papers moved, and a faint smell of cologne hung in the air, my father's brand. On the ceiling corner above my bed, I found a small black dot, a camera lens. Within hours, David's encrypted message arrived. They're planning something for the anniversary of grandfather's death. Coded messages mention midnight meeting and family business. The phrase made my stomach knot. Family business was what my father called every crime he ever justified. 2 weeks later, a note slid under my apartment door. No envelope, just a folded sheet of paper in his handwriting. Allison, your grandfather's grave needs tending. Midnight. We have unfinished business. I called Reyes immediately. He's here, I said. We know. He crossed into Spain with a forged passport 3 days ago. We'll have agents hidden throughout the cemetery. Are you ready? Ready wasn't the right word, but I nodded anyway. The night of the anniversary, the cemetery was colder than I remembered. I wore black, not for mourning, but for camouflage. A bouquet of white roses trembled in my hands. Agents hid among the headstones, ghosts with radios. He was already there, standing over grandfather's grave. The moon caught his hair, white now, thin, and turned him into a statue carved from failure. Hello, Allison, he said without turning. You destroyed everything. I stopped a few feet away. I exposed everything. Semantics. He turned, and the years in prison had hollowed him out. 40 years of work, alliances, opportunities, gone. For what? So you could play saint in a city that will forget your name the moment the news cycle moves on? You hurt people, Dad. Children. His face twisted. Business is business. Your grandfather understood that. He built his fortune on secrets and blood, just like I did. He spent the rest of his life trying to atone for it. He was a hypocrite, he snapped. The only difference between us was that he wanted forgiveness. I don't. He reached into his jacket. My pulse stuttered. But instead of a weapon, he pulled out an envelope thick with papers. I'm here to make you an offer. Inside this are the locations of 12 safe deposit boxes. Money, gold, clean identities. Take it and disappear. Stop your crusade and you'll live. And if I refuse, then you die here tonight. He said it so calmly it almost sounded like permission. Dad, I said, my voice trembling, you'd kill your own daughter? You stopped being my daughter the day you betrayed me. A voice broke from behind the gravestone. And you stopped being our father the day you sold a child. My father spun. David stepped from the shadows, gun leveled, eyes steady. It's over. For the first time, fear flickered across my father's face. You're supposed to be dead. I got better. Floodlights exploded around us. Agents rose from behind crypts and statues, weapons drawn. Detective Reyes stepped forward, her badge glinting under the moon. Thomas Morrison, you're under arrest for human trafficking, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit murder. My father froze, every escape route collapsing like bad architecture. You think this ends it? He snarled. There are others. You'll never find them all. Reyes's voice was calm. We already have. As agents cuffed him, he turned toward me, eyes burning. You'll regret this. Maybe, I said, but at least I'll be able to sleep. When they dragged him away, his feet scraped the gravel, the sound like nails on marble. David lowered the gun, hands shaking now that the danger had passed. The roses I'd brought had fallen at our feet, petals scattered across the grave like snow. Reyes approached, exhaling. Operation Family Values is complete. 83 arrests in 12 countries. It's over. I looked down at the roses, at the name carved in stone. No, I said quietly. It's just beginning. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of salt from the sea. Somewhere far off, a church bell struck midnight. For the first time in years, the night didn't feel like an enemy. It felt like a blueprint, unfinished, but finally clean. The morning after the arrests, Barcelona woke under a sky scrubbed clean by rain. News drones hovered above the courthouse. Reporters shouted into microphones about Operation Family Values, the largest coordinated trafficking bust in European history. The headlines were loud, but inside me, there was only quiet. Reyes and I watched the coverage from a safe house outside Madrid. My father's image flashed across the screen, handcuffed, eyes hollow, but defiant. My mother sat beside him, chin high, pretending the cameras were dinner guests she still needed to impress. It's over, David said, standing by the window. His reflection looked older than his years. Is it? I asked. Reyes muted the television. He'll never see daylight again. Between Spain, the U.S., and Interpol, he's facing life. His associates are either in custody or dead. You've done enough. Enough, the word felt unfinished. For days, agents debriefed us. Analysts sifted through terabytes of data from the seized servers, and prosecutors lined up witnesses. Every time I thought the story was over, another thread unraveled. Politicians, bankers, people whose power had always felt untouchable. The network wasn't just a family business. It was a legacy of rot stretching across decades. On the third day, Reyes found me sitting outside under the pale morning light. What will you do now? She asked. Build, I said. The way he wanted me to, but differently this time. She smiled faintly. You know, your grandfather's files are changing everything. You could disappear now, live quietly. No one would blame you. Quiet doesn't suit me anymore. 3 months later, I was back at the community center in Barcelona. The courtyard was alive with sound. Children laughing, social workers talking, the rhythm of hope rebuilding itself. The walls I'd designed for safety now held murals painted by the survivors themselves, oceans, stars, names written in looping script. A little girl ran up to me, waving a piece of paper. Senorita Alison, I made this. It was a drawing of the building. Bright colors, open windows, a sun larger than the roof. Across the top, in careful letters, she had written, Home. I knelt to her level. It's beautiful, I said. She smiled, missing a front tooth. This is my home now. Those words did something to me. They anchored me. That evening, Reyes joined me at a small restaurant near the harbor. The city glowed like molten glass beyond the windows. Interpol finished processing the seized assets, she said between sips of wine. Over 400 million redirected to victim compensation and law enforcement training. Your grandfather would have approved. Would he? I asked. He spent half his life hiding what he'd built. He wasn't hiding, she said. He was waiting for someone who could use it right. I turned my glass slowly. And David? Still working with our task force, she said. He's helping locate survivors hidden by the network. The government gave him permanent witness status under his new identity. He sends reports, never selfies. I laughed softly. That sounds like him. Reyes tilted her head. And you? Staying an architect, or are you tempted by the badge? I hesitated. Both. I want to design spaces that heal. but also help find the ones who never made it to safety. Her eyes narrowed, with something like approval. That's a rare combination. We could use people who think in blueprints. By the following spring, I was enrolled in the FBI Academy at Quantico. The days were long, the nights longer, and every time I doubted myself, I remembered grandfather's handwriting. Justice heals. Revenge multiplies orphans. 2 years later, Special Agent Alison Navarre graduated with distinction. My first assignment took me to Warsaw to coordinate with Interpol on dismantling a trafficking route that mirrored my father's old network. In one raid, we found a basement where 7 children waited in silence, too afraid to cry. Among them was a girl about 13, clutching a crumpled photograph of her family. When she saw our badges, she asked in broken English, "Are we really free?" "Yes," I told her. "You're really free." She smiled, small and shy, and something in my chest loosened that had been locked since the night of the cemetery. Back in Barcelona, the Morrison Community Center had grown. We opened 2 sister locations, one in Prague, another in Vienna, each one funded by seized criminal assets, each designed with light in every corner. No shadows deep enough for secrets to grow. Reporters called it poetic justice. I called it design. One afternoon, I stood in the courtyard of the Barcelona Center as construction crews broke ground for an expansion. The mayor shook my hand for the cameras. "Thanks to the Morrison Trust Restoration," he said, "we'll shelter over 200 women and children each year." "How does it feel," a journalist asked, "to use your family's fortune for something good?" "It feels like justice," I said. "My grandfather always told me, the best revenge against darkness is to build something bright." Applause rippled through the crowd. I caught Reyes watching from the back, her arms crossed, but her smile visible even from a distance. Later at dinner, she raised a glass. "Too light," she said. "To building it," I replied. Years passed quietly, or as quietly as they could in the work we did. David and I met every few months under new names and new skies, exchanging files and stories. We never talked about the past, not the house, not the betrayals, not the graves. Some things were foundations best left buried. 5 years after my father's arrest, I returned alone to my grandfather's grave. The inscription had changed, paid for by seized assets and approved by the court. "The best revenge against darkness is to build something bright." I laid white roses at the base of the stone. "Thank you," I whispered. The cemetery was still. The city hummed beyond the gates, alive with noise and motion. I stood there a long time until the wind picked up and carried the scent of salt through the trees. For the first time, the silence felt full instead of empty. Months later, while working a case in Poland, we raided a transport warehouse and found a room filled with frightened children. The youngest clung to my arm, her voice barely a whisper. "Will we have a home?" I thought of the community centers, of Carmen's drawing, of the sun painted too big to fit the page. "Yes," I said, "we're going to build you one." When the operation ended and the children were safe, I sat alone in the back of the transport bus, hands stained with dust and hope. Outside, dawn was rising over the fields, a pale, forgiving light. I remembered my grandfather's last words, "You see clearly." For years, I'd treated those words as a burden. Now, I understood they were permission. Seeing clearly isn't just noticing what's broken. It's imagining what could stand in its place. The Morrison Community Foundation grew into 12 centers across Europe, each one a cathedral of recovery, safe rooms, warm colors, hallways curved to guide without trapping. We designed spaces that whispered, "You're safe now." Sometimes, late at night, I work alone under a desk lamp, blueprints spread out before me, the quiet hum of the world turning outside. I draw, erase, redraw. Lines of light replacing the lines of blood that built my family's empire. When exhaustion finally claims me, I close my notebook and whisper into the silence, half prayer, half promise. We're still building. And somewhere in this back of my mind, I can almost hear grandfather's voice, warm and steady. "Justice heals. Build bright things.